Here we are for episode 37.
How are you doing, Rob?
I am well, and how are you?
Doing pretty good.
You've moved your camera, I think.
Really? It's because I'm not really good at Zoom today. Zoom has
No
been
worries.
kind of weird.
Yeah, you've been having
So
some technical issues, haven't you?
yeah, I have been to be
Yeah,
sure.
that's
Mhm.
cool. And it's morning too. It's Sunday morning, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Sunday's morning. It's
Yeah.
always Sunday morning.
Yes, exactly.
But
That's
yeah,
right.
yep.
Yes. All right, so I've got a couple of items today. So the first one is pertains to Australia. The other one's more global. So in Australia, we've had recently a lot of people saying that 2 women per week are being murdered in domestic violence. They really mean intimate partner violence, but murdered in domestic violence. Okay, 2 women per week in Australia. Actually, that's not true. The rate is actually a little bit under one. In fact, it's been declining for decades in a long-term decline. There are spikes up, okay, as we'll get to, but long-term decline. And while I'm on the subject, it's worth mentioning that society has been getting progressively more safe for thousands of years, and every century has per capita been less violent than the one before it, and that's even true when you include the world wars of the 20th century. So society is getting more safe. That's a global phenomenon. Domestic violence rates are trending down, at least in the West. Okay. Um, while on the subject too, feminists sometimes call for an end to domestic violence. I don't think you can end domestic violence without changing the human condition, unfortunately. I think there must be some sort of minimum level we'll get to, and I suspect we're probably pretty close to it. I think I don't know if the rates will go down much more than they have. Maybe a little bit, hopefully in the long term, but I don't think that they're going to go down too much more. But anyway, so the feminists have been proclaiming that 2 women per week have died in Australia as a result of domestic violence. And as we know, that's just not what the data shows. It did, in fact, happen for a few weeks over the last couple of months. Okay, so and it's sort of cold. It comes across a little cold to say this when you're talking about people's lives, but it's a statistical aberration. That's the reality of it.
Right.
Unfortunately, more women were killed during the last few weeks than you would normally expect in Australia. It's just just a very unfortunate situation. Now, this isn't the first time this has happened. In 2015, in Australia, something very similar happened, and again there were a few more women killed. It was actually about the same, about 2 per week were killed over a period of about 7 or 8 weeks or something like that. And we had the feminists again proclaiming that 2 women per week were being killed, and for years and years after that, we heard people online repeating that because that is what they had been told, that is what they believed was the normal rate, and it isn't. It's actually, as I said, a little bit under one and declining. In 2017, at the beginning of 2017, as I recall, there was actually a brief period where it was men who were being murdered as a result of intimate partner violence. But the difference was we realized that it was just a statistical aberration and that would not be continuing. And we didn't go out and proclaim that suddenly lots of men were dying as a result of IPV, okay? Because we recognized what was going on. It was a very unfortunate, horrible situation that those men had died, just as it had been for the women. But we realized that in the long term, that was not going to be the new normal. And of course, the long-term trend returned to where it was. But here we are again, same as 2015, now it's 2024, and we have feminists and even some politicians going out and repeating this statement that just isn't true. A short statistical aberration does not mean the long-term trend has suddenly changed.
Right.
And there we
One
are.
thing I like to, yeah, absolutely. So it's been said that uh, every time we show tragedy happening to women and girls, that's the one that elicits the most sympathy. But sometimes they need to kind of realize that it sort of backfires sometimes. Sometimes it's the juiciest
Mm.
as opposed to sympathy. I think that the feminists are kind of disappointed that it's not more women killed that they can claim.
Well, I mean, my view is that the approach taken by all governments and the approach taken by these organizations that are overwhelmingly feminist is simply doomed to fail because it ignores problems like reciprocal partner violence. And I believe that many of these organizations aren't really interested in the problem going away, because if the problem went away, the money would stop.
Right.
So they're quite happy to beat it up, get larger grants from the government, and laugh all the way to the bank, rather than talk about the reality of the situation, which is that more than half of all intimate partner violence is reciprocal in nature. Both partners are both victims and perpetrators. But you won't hear that coming from a politician, and you won't hear it from anyone in the mainstream domestic violence industry.
Right.
So I just wanted to set the record straight on that. And if any Australians will be hearing this pretty regularly at the moment, and no doubt if 2015 is anything to go by, you will continue to hear it for years to come, because there will be people who just heard this, men and women alike, who heard this, believed it, and will repeat it, even though that's not what the data shows at all.
Gotcha.
And my second topic is more global. Bears.
How about them?
Yes. Well, they're pretty dangerous, actually, I think, at times. So, yes, I think probably everybody knows about what's been going on there, where a number of women, primarily feminists, I think, who have been claiming that they would rather hang out with bears in the woods. So basically, if you're in the woods, would you rather have a bear or a man with you? And a lot of them are saying they would rather have a bear with them than a man. I would suggest that's probably a poor choice to make. But I realize many of them aren't being serious when they say it, but even the fact that they're saying it, and some of them seem to be, it's really quite disappointing. And
Well, it's designed to condescend, basically, even if
is.
they don't necessarily mean it's meant to put down men. It's
Exactly.
the entire point of it. Yeah.
Exactly. It has been meme fuel for anti-feminists, though. So there are a steady stream of bear-related memes coming out now, which are quite amusing. I'll see if we can put some of those on Wiki for Men. But yeah, this is the situation we have, that some women are claiming they'd rather be in the woods with a bear than a man. And well, I mean, it's interesting. I read about, I can't recall the gentleman's name now. I read about one aficionado of bears, actually, who, despite bears being intelligent creatures and generally being able to recognize, the difference between, so that I've heard things like, crocodiles mix up, food and the person who gives you food. Bears are intelligent creatures. They don't make that mistake. Having said that, one gentleman I read about some years ago, he'd been warned about safety procedures and he'd ignored them, and he got mauled to death by a grizzly bear. And he was a bear expert, and had been, even caring for them. So they're intelligent, but they're potentially dangerous wild animals.
Well, who among women did not know that? I mean, probably all of them. They did not know that.
I hope, especially people living in North America, where you have a number of bears. Oh, by the way, so I've lived in North America, right? And I was familiar, not in areas where there were bears, but of course I'm familiar with polar bears and grizzly bears and black bears, and I know that grizzly bears are larger and more aggressive and so forth. But I found it as a fourth kind of bear, the sloth bear, which lives in India. So I didn't know that previously. See, so this has also been educational.
Absolutely. Yeah, because the reason some of you have noticed I had not talked at all about the bears thing because I didn't want to indulge the idiots. So, I mean, I didn't want to feed more to such a stupid subject.
Yeah, I haven't been commenting publicly either before this. Go on.
Right, because really, do you have to? Do you have to talk about bears?
Exactly.
Right, yeah. But I was tempted to say that a bear won't take nearly half to all your property and then go off with the kids. A bear won't do that.
They might take some of your tent, but apart from that, you're right. That's exactly. They'll leave the rest of your property alone. That's right.
Right, yeah. A bear will not falsely accuse you of rape.
This is true. So maybe there should be some men out there with the bears. You know what? Maybe they'd probably keep some distance anyway. But yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, if the bears are so harmless, I think we should commission women to get some blood samples from them, because I have a point to this, because one thing I've actually learned a while back was that bear's blood was actually a subject of testing for trying to investigate like how to cure like kidney diseases and blood diseases.
Really?
Because they hibernate, and they don't have any kind of they don't like defecate or whatever all winter when they
Ah,
hibernate, and their blood is actually just fine. They completely regulate that stuff. So it's like been a subject of scientific curiosity, at least based on some of the source material I was reading. I don't know how well it's researched now. I haven't really followed up on it, but it's just something I've learned a short while back.
that's a really interesting point, actually. Yes, I'd never thought of that. How are they filtering their blood? I know that their circulation
Mhm.
would go down along with the heart rate and so forth, but even so, 6 months or months is a long period of time to be hibernating.
Mhm.
So that's a really interesting area, actually.
Yeah, right. And that's all I know about bears. And
As I said, yes, I've never lived in an area with bears. I tend to be quite to try to be prepared when going. So I was going to a bear area. I would have bear spray and so forth. I've heard of a lot of people who are quite casual with this sort of thing and go into bear areas completely unprepared. And
right.
I think that yes, if you're going to do something like that, make sure you've got the right equipment with you because this equipment exists. Modern technology provides it for us, and we can hopefully, if a bear attacks or approaches you, you can get away without harming the bear and being harmed yourself. But yeah, it's unfortunate. The other thing I was thinking about with these bears being a topic at the moment was how many people have been very casual with bear safety. Actually, this gentleman who died and lots of other people. And I think this is something that it's a bit of preparation. It's an important thing.
Mhm.
So for any women are going out and spending time with bears, you probably want to take some bear spray with you. And I think there's a few other things you can use. Well, there may be sonic devices, I think too, that can be used to drive them away.
Mhm. Right. But why would they want to drive him away, though?
Oh, good point, because they're perfectly safe. You're right. My mistake. Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yep.
That's right. Yes.
Yep.
Right. You know what? Forget the bear
Mhm.
spray. It's all good. Yeah.
Yeah, man. After all, bears don't say mean things online.
Yeah. That's because it's really hard to type with the claws.
Yeah. Right. No. They can type. They just don't do it because of the goodness of their hearts.
Choose not to, right?
Yeah, they are the one good man.
So,
Yeah.
yes, that's all I really had on bears. I just think the entire thing's quite amusing. Compared to some of the other attacks that have been made against men in the past, it's
Mhm.
pretty weak and a bit of a bit of a laugh at the same time. As I said, we really do have a large number of memes coming out.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know. Like yourself, I haven't responded to any feminists. I normally don't respond to feminists typically these days.
Sure. Yeah.
They're generally time sinks. So. I would rather spend that time
Yeah.
writing my book or something like that than responding to them.
Well, maybe the feminist women think they're other kin. I mean, they're kind of burly, they're kind of huge, maybe a bit hairy, so I think they think they're bear kin or something. So,
That probably makes more sense. Exactly.
hmm yeah, right. hmm
So that's about all I had on bears. Did you have any topics you wanted to discuss?
Well, not a ton. It's just trying to get a lot of ideas down before I can write them when it comes to articles and such. So one thing is, Mother's Day is coming up here in the United States, and was wondering if you can kind of improvise some ideas off of that.
Oh, for articles.
So, well, no, just to talk right now, So just
Oh, right.
I don't want to devote like 6 articles to Mother's Day, but
Yeah.
so yeah,
Well,
yeah, so yeah,
like actually, it's funny you should mention that because it's actually been Mother's Day here in Australia today. It's
okay,
Sunday. Uh, we've had so a few years ago, we had an academic by the name of I'm going to do. I'm just going to get her name. If I can find it, I think I've got it
yeah.
right
Oh yeah,
here.
today is Mother's Day, isn't it? I haven't really paid much mind to the exact date. That's pretty
It
funny.
is, yeah, because that's right. Because Mother's Day is generally the same, but Father's Day tends to vary around the world, which was
hmm
fun when I lived in North America because I could never get a Father's Day card at Father's Day
Mm,
because it was at a different time of the year. So I had to plan months ahead to get a Father's Day card.
sure,
But
yeah.
anyway, getting back to Mother's Day, Actually, this is about Father's Day. Some years ago, there was an academic by the name of Red Ruby Scarlet, and I have it on good authority that's not her real name. But anyway, Dr. Red Ruby Scarlet, at least it's not her birth name, she proposed that Father's Day should be renamed Special Persons Day. I believe I have mentioned this briefly on a previous episode. So anyway, an Australian supermarket by the name of Woolworths actually thought this was a good idea. They were among the few who did think this was a good idea. By the way, their nickname now in Australia is Wokeworths, because they are of our major supermarket chains. Woolworths are very much the woke brand. Anyway, they thought that creating cakes with Special Persons Day instead of Father's Day was a good idea, and they were roundly mocked. Even people who aren't necessarily anti-woke thought this was all a bit ridiculous and should really go away. And so they haven't tried that again. That was 2017, and they haven't tried that again. But interestingly enough, this year I actually heard a school replaced. It's very common in Australia and probably other countries too, prior to Mother's Day and Father's Day, for there to be kind of a school fair where kids can go and buy stuff, because it's obviously hard for kids to get out to the shops. So they give kids an opportunity to buy little things for their parents. Anyway, Sydney, sorry, I should say, I don't know if it's in Sydney, but an Australian grammar school, which is a private school, held one of these fairs recently, and rather than calling it Mother's Day, I don't have the exact term, but they called it something about, Parents' Day or something like that. And there's been a massive pushback on it. And this is something we do see quite a lot, actually. The wokies attack men a lot, right? But and they managed to get the law changed, but then the law of unintended consequences has this sometimes come back on women. I mean, this is one example. There's another example, actually, of battered wife syndrome that I've been looking at recently. And in fact, I posted one of Paul's old articles from 2014. I reposted it. And basically, the argument is that, women can be battered to the point where they're desperate, and then they murder their husband, who they claim has been abusing them for a long period of time. There was even a Canadian academic who argued that women should essentially be taken on face value. Their words should be taken, just accepted, that they were abused by their husbands, and they should essentially be able to kill their husbands. That was her argument. Interestingly enough, some men have actually used this defense. And oh my gosh, the feminists have just gone ballistic when this happens. One article that Paul talks about in the 2014 article that I reposted, one case, this man got off this case, and some of the people involved in the case that knew the woman was saying that men were getting away with murdering their wives using this law, and they wanted the law changed. Well, that was the last you heard of that, because there's far more women using that as a defense than there are men.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's very unusual for a man to successfully use that defense. And it just so happened in that particular case, there was very, very good evidence that she was abusive, and he was able to convince a jury of 9 women and 3 men that he had a defense killing her. So, but anyway, yes, it was interesting that some people were very outraged when this happened, and they wanted the law changed. But of course, that law won't be changed, because a lot more women are using it after murdering their husband. Or killing their husbands, yes.
Yeah. So
that's interesting. The article's on, I think it's currently on A Voice for Men. Very interesting article. So what I'm doing is, by the way, since we've sort of come to that topic, I've been reposting some of Paul's old articles and calling them classic Elam. So you'll see that in the title. And these are ones that to distinguish it from stuff that Paul's doing at the moment. But these are some of the articles he's written over the years, and I'm reposting them to the site.
Yep, that's always exciting.
And yeah, that's probably all I've got, except of course for my final comment that I always make. But do you have anything you want to
so there's been a lot of chatter, now that I think about it, speaking of rebranding, that word kind of sparked a few things. So as of late, we've been kind of hearing that the Boy Scouts have been rebranded to, I think it was called, what was it called? Scouting BSA, I think it is. I think, BSA being the Boy Scouts of America.
Yeah.
That's the abbreviation for that one. And well, there's been a lot of talk. I've seen a lot of mixed talk about this subject because a lot of our concerns about like this inclusion about girls into the Boy Scouts kind of a thing.
Mm.
But I've been seeing a lot of pushback. Some from our own movement, not our own movement, but the non woke sphere of things
Mm.
um, that there is still going to be a girls division and a boys division, and it's not exactly mixing. Basically,
Really? Is that because I
right,
understood
right.
that
So,
they had been mixing them for a number of years?
well, yeah, that's my point. I'm not really sure where some of these arguments are actually coming from, but it's being uh, pretty hot in terms of like pretty heated in terms of
Mm.
uh, in trying to kind of counter argue that this is like any real integration of sorts. But I've seen some of the arguments, and it's kind of just weird for me. I mean, all I'm getting from this is that if we've gone through the because their argument is that this was due to financial issues, basically
Mhm.
the rebranding, and so they can actually kind of get more people actually in the organization altogether. I
Mm.
think that's my understanding of it. But then my response becomes, if you're bothering to be doing this integration thing, why aren't you mixing them anyway?
Mm.
It
That's right.
seems it seems like another bit of you have to include us in this thing, but you but you still have to separate them because
Because
the girls have to be protected from the boys, and
icky boys. Exactly. That's right.
Mhm.
Um,
Exactly. That's all I'm getting from it. So I'm not
mm.
really understanding this chest beating about how this isn't really the woke problem that we thought it was, or so.
Yeah, that's interesting because I've obviously the girls have been available, has been able to go into the Boy Scouts of America for a number of years, and my understanding was that they were just in mixed units. But I admit I've never really looked very closely at it, so perhaps that's not the
Mm.
case. But I don't think that surely they wouldn't be now segregating them, and then when they hadn't previously. Yeah, it's
Right.
certainly worth looking into that. Interestingly, too, the Girl Scouts of America are apparently quite upset about all this, about girls being allowed, because
Oh,
they
they
say
are.
they've been siphoning off members. There is, of course, one solution for the Girl Scouts of America. They could just let boys in.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
But this is not something that these people talk about. They're kind of on the defense of scouting BSA at the moment. So yeah, I, I'm. I think this is um, it's one of those things you kind of get unconsciously drifted over to, like when if there's a chance to kind of downplay this phenomenon of of females invading male spaces, then it's almost knee jerk. They just kind of jump right at it and start feeling self-righteous about it, I think
Yeah.
so.
Well, this is the thing, and this is another example of this phenomenon of something hitting men and then end up reflecting back on women too. As we know, male spaces have been under attack for decades. I mean, the Garrett Club in the UK is actually a classic example. The Garrett Club is a men's club, which has just recently opened up to women. But there are a lot of women's only clubs, and some of them are more exclusive than the men's clubs. And none of them are coming under fire to open up for men. I have a list on Wiki for Men, quite an extensive list now of these clubs, both for men's clubs and women's clubs. But there've been many in Australia that have opened up in similar ways that is, the men's clubs have opened up to women, but the women's clubs never open up to men, nor are they called upon to open up to men
Hmm.
by anyone in the mainstream.
Right.
And this is a common trend. So anyway, men's spaces have been under attack for decades. Men's
Mhm.
sheds, which are very
Right.
big in Australia, of course, were originally just for men. They're not anymore. That's something Bettina Art has really pointed out actually, and has gone out to try to defend the men's sheds. Now, of course, we're seeing women's spaces come under attack, and it's a very different picture from the mainstream, isn't it? They're very upset about this
Hmm.
and proclaiming how unjust it is that men can be invading women's spaces when in actual fact men's spaces have been invaded for decades. And my position has always been both or neither. If I don't particularly care for single sex spaces myself, so from a personal point of view it doesn't bother me. Either have both, and that's fine, or if you decide you can't have both, then don't have either. That's fine by me as well.
Mhm.
But what bothers me is one being allowed and the other not being allowed.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. It's all
So,
about the freedom of association. It's not something that we have any administration towards. You got to have like this or that. Just don't stop anyone from associating exactly the way that they want to. And any given organization, is going to, well, in theory, um, include or exclude exactly who they want. But people who are liable to enter them can vote with their proverbial wallet, and choose whatever it is. So you can't.
absolutely.
Right. So this is not about overarching trying to govern anything like that. It's like people are probably going to naturally want men's only spaces, and we're just objecting to the mandates that would say you got
Mm.
to. Be it societal pressure or otherwise, that that you gotta let women in, girls in, and the funny thing is, the more women start, piling into these mixed groups, the more they try to make it like a girls group over again.
Mm.
So, right, it's a weird kind of cycle. It's like a metastasis of cancer. It just kind of it keeps on taking over one spot at a time, and then just kind of overrunning it and kicking everything healthy out.
So I've got an interesting example actually. So there's a museum in Australia. It's actually it's a private museum, but it's actually very, very well known. It's in the city of Hobart in Tasmania, which is quite out of the way, even by by Australian standards. It's that island in the south of Australia. If you've ever looked at a map, I've never actually been to Tasmania. Anyway, the museum is called the Museum of Old and New Art, or MONA, and it's just usually referred to as Mona. Well, Mona had a women's only exhibit, and a
Mhm.
Tasmanian man took them to court, and he won and said that they can't discriminate on the basis of gender or sex, if you prefer, for someone going into Mona, into this particular part of Mona. Well, that was maybe a couple of months ago. The latest, and it's only come out in the last week or so. They're going to define the exhibit as a bathroom,
Mm.
women's bathroom.
Wow.
So men won't be allowed in because it'll be a women's bathroom. I think they're probably going to have to put a working toilet in the middle of the exhibit. I suppose they'll consider that to be part of the art. But anyway, that's their solution.
Sure.
I have to admit, it's
Yeah.
a clever solution.
Mhm.
Yep. So I can just imagine there's going to be a working toilet in the middle of the art exhibit. That alone would be worth seeing, probably. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yes, but that's what anyway.
Yep.
So it's an interesting argument, and if it works, it actually
Mhm.
opens up all sorts of interesting possibilities for single sex spaces to the extent that that only one sex is allowed inside of the bathroom.
Mhm. Right.
So
Mhm.
I'll keep you posted on that one and see how it goes. See how it
Uh,
goes. Whether they can implement it successfully, whether they can, whether it flies in court, because this gentleman may well appeal again.
mhm.
And then the court will have to assess whether this is legitimately a place for women only.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I would have retorted and say, "Well, that's a good idea because that's where sewage belongs." But um, eh, eh, as a commentary on their art, not that I know anything about the art in question, but
Indeed. Yeah, for that and various other reasons, I would have no interest in going to Mona, but it is considered to be very popular, and yes, they have excluded men from at least one part of it for a while. So that's Mona and single sex spaces.
right. Yeah. Yep. This is definitely going to be a short one. I think I'm out of the proverbial gasoline.
No
I
worries.
think
I've been quite busy too with some personal stuff going on, and um, I've been doing stuff behind the scenes with ABFM. So you haven't seen much in the way of writing from me, or even posting on X. But yeah, they've got some stuff going on behind the scenes that I've been finishing off. So I'll get
yeah.
back to writing again in the next few weeks.
Yeah, and I'm just juggling like a bunch of ideas. I'm always kind of dabbling in one thing or the other. I'm not really good at focusing on one one thing at the expense of others or something like that. So I just work really strangely. But I will tell you that there might be a couple of interviews coming on my channel, conducted by myself,
Hmm.
in the coming future. So
Excellent.
look out for that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Yes, looks like a short episode, which I think works just fine tonight. I shall get back to that to those projects I've been working on. Thank you very much, Vernon. I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Sure. See you then.